Welcome everybody to February's Officer Club Clash. That's right, not the Officer Club Championship, not the OCC you're quite used to, a little bit of a tweak to it, but I am excited. This is day one of 3 days where we're going to be breaking down the quarterfinals. I am joined by Darkness, I am joined by Spooz. We got a great day ahead of us today. Tune in tomorrow, we're gonna be able to break down the semifinals for you, and then you've got the finals and the third place match the day after that. So not only have we changed the format a bit, we've also changed the prizes. The Officers Club Clash will get you points. These points will help you make it to the Officer Club Ultimate, which is held in a little bit more of a standard tournament that you're used to seeing here in KARDS. So we got a lot of new stuff, trying some things out. I think you're going to enjoy it. I definitely will enjoy my time with Darkness and Spooz here. But before we get too deep into it, let's bring up the bracket so everybody can take a look and see what they will be expecting. When we talk about points, now this is the top 8. Place 9 to 38, so those who participated in the OCC qualifiers will still net 4 points towards the Officer Club Championship Ultimate that's going to be coming up in a couple months. So everybody here is guaranteed a minimum of 8 points. That means Berto versus Noin, J King versus Freddie, Uwumoy versus Head. Those are all going to be getting 8 or more points if they move forward. You see Zia Lang against Tiger there. Unfortunately, Zia had to drop due to some personal events going on, and Tiger is going to be moving forward into the semifinals. So you'll see Tiger in action tomorrow. But first, we decided we would lead this very special first ever event off with our 2-time defending champion J King taking on Freddie. Freddie being a newcomer here. First time Freddie is participating in the OCC, so it should be a heck of a matchup, seeing if they can dethrone the Giant. Coming into this, Darkness, are you thinking, hey, this person has no chance, J King is going to crush them? Or, you might have that upset of J King's faced a lot of people in his time on top, but hasn't faced Freddie yet.
Well, J King and underdog stories are a different chapter. I remember Dian coming in with very strange decks, with OTK decks, and everyone thought, who's that guy? He can't win against J King. What are those decks? They don't look strong. And J King lost and Dian won. So it's possible, but J King is a 2 times champion and he has way more experience. So I would bet on him.
Absolutely. Spooz, any different thoughts, or you're just going to go with the easy bet? And yeah, it's probably J King. He's probably going, we've seen him, qualify for every single one of these. So he's got the experience on his side.
Yeah, for sure. But on the other hand, as Darkness mentioned, some newcomers have shown in the past some really good performances and some really, cool stuff that we haven't seen so far. And Freddie also has some interesting decks today that not a lot of players are bringing in this OCC. So yeah, I think Freddie has a chance here, but it's always an easy one to go with J King. But yeah, just to take something different than Darkness, I just say that Freddie might take the win here today.
All right, well, let's dive in to get to know our players a little bit. Let's bring up the player card here for J King. This is no surprise at this point. Finishing second to good friend Berto Burrito, but 218 matches, 80% win rate. I've seen all the player cards already, so I'm going to talk about efficiency, but that's probably the least or one of the least amount of matches played. Only 55 losses, just absolutely crushing it. Finishing second here. So no surprise that J King is one of, if not always, one of the favorites. So let's dive into the deck list, because there is something very special here. And Darkness, I know you prepare with J King fairly often. What the heck is going on here?
Well, this is a time where I'm starting to worry about my money. I bet on him. Well, so first, the first two decks are looking fine. He's running J aggro, Japan, German, aggressive deck. Everyone knows J aggro. Probably most of the KARDS players are starting with this deck, climbing the ladder. You're using a lot of cheap units, throwing them into the front line, going aggressive against the HQ, and grinding down the HP of your opponent. The second deck is different and more like my style. It's a control deck and more heavy control deck. German, Italy, control. You have everything. This deck is very flexible. You have some early answers to aggressive decks like Careless Talks, From the Deep, Sudden Strikes to be able to kill aggressive units getting thrown at you in the beginning. Bologna Regiment and the Decisive Defense are really helpful guards. In the mid game, you have hard removals like Lion for a Day, Jagdbomber, Admiral Hipper, and in the late game, you have very strong units like Panther G, heavy tank, with heavy armor, cannot be targeted by enemy orders, annihilation to remove and discard your opponent, and of course Leopold, one of the strongest elites in the game. And his third deck is a singleton deck. I'm not entirely sure why he brought that. A singleton deck is a deck where there's no duplicates, so every copy in his deck is a single one. This is where the name comes from, singleton. But he chooses the best combination of nations to actually pull this off. With Soviet Italy, you have a strong control possibility, and you tend to have a lot of single copies by the nature of this deck. Soviet has tons of strong elites like 272nd Guards, Winter Offensive, Naval Brigade, KV-1, 39th Rifle Regiment, Armored Train, only to name a few, I think half of it. And you have a great variety of the amount of cards by the nature of this deck, so it's relatively easy to reduce some copies here and replace them with some copies of other strong cards there. And I know he practiced this deck, and this was relatively strong. Not amazingly strong, but relatively strong on ladder. But to be fair, I think he could do better.
Maybe J King is playing, 4D chess or something, and he knows we have a special ops singleton coming up, and he's just prepping his decks for it. Maybe that's it. But Spooz, if you're Freddie and you're looking at these deck lists, you go, okay, Jagro, I can handle that. Okay, control. J King's pretty solid with his control deck, so maybe I want to ban that Germany list. But then you look at the grocery list that he has. Do you look at it and ever go, I don't even know what this is? Do I ban it because I don't know what to expect? Or do I play into it because I don't think it's that strong?
Actually, when looking at Freddie's deck or lineup, he's actually in a good spot to just ban this singleton deck, because he has good matchups against the other two decks from J King there, that Jagro deck and the German Italy control deck. So yeah, I think there's a decent chance that we don't see that Soviet deck, although I would be pretty interested to see this one in action, because yeah, I think we've never seen this before. A deck with only one copy of each card in an OCC. That's definitely something new.
Well, you talked about Freddie's lists. Sorry, Freddie. Let's bring up Freddie's player card and get to know him a little bit, since it is his first time competing, hailing from Argentina. 301 matches, 70% win rate. So again, solid play there. Finishing 19th, so did have to work his way through the qualifiers to get here, but here Freddie is. Got the Comet hanging out as the favorite card. I don't think that is any surprise. A few people probably dig that Comet just a little bit. Let us take a look at the decks, because I know, Spooz, you were pretty jazzed to walk us through these.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And the two decks that I talked about that are pretty good here from Freddie against J-King would be the second and the third. But yeah, we're just starting with the first one, which is just Soviet self-damage, but with Italy ally, but only for those 3 Mare Nostrums. The rest of the cards are only Soviet cards, and yeah, they're just there to just damage your own HQ, get the cost reduction on the 34th guards, or just letting the 456 Rifle Regiment grow each time your HQ receives damage from your own cards. And then you just overwhelm your opponent. And with the Mare Nostrum, you have the possibility, even if you get into the damage disadvantage from just, not just your opponent wants to damage your HQ, you want to do the same. And with the Mare Nostrum, you have good chances to just, if you are down to 5, 6, 7 health late in the game, and sometimes when you play this deck, you are in a spot where you're no longer able to play your self-discard cards, or not self-discard, but self-damage cards, because otherwise you're just risking to die from your own damage. But with the Mare Nostrum, you have the chance to just heal yourself back up with a big Mare Nostrum on those big 34th guards, and can just give you more flexibility in the late game. And we've seen this deck a few times now. It was not too successful. I think J-King kind of invented it or brought it first into an OCC. So I'm kind of excited to see, first of all, if we see this deck in action here today and how it is performing. But now the second deck, Japan-France Resistance. A deck that's actually not too bad against J-King's Jaguar lineup, and also the discard control, I guess. Because in J-King's Germany list, there's a lot of Sudden Strikes, Flammpanzers, a lot of tools, and also Annihilations. A lot of tools that want to target early game units, and Annihilation can only target units that cost 5 or less. And as we see in this Japan list here, there's barely any units, and if there are units, they cannot be targeted from the deployment effects or orders from J-King's deck. So it is actually very good. It's just clocking J-King's hand. He's maybe not able to draw the important stuff, like the Pentags that are actually pretty good against this, because Defend and Death, a very strong removal, cannot target those. So Freddie needs to find other ways to remove that. But on the other hand, there's also Liberation in this deck, which is pretty strong against Jagro. Then you have the Naval Operation, also a pretty good tool against aggressive decks that play ground units. So I think with this deck, if it's not getting banned, Freddie has a good chance to beat J-King at least once. And then we have a Britain-Japan air deck. Also a very strong deck against other aggressive decks like Brit Air. For a long time now, a very strong deck in the meta, and with the new IG D3, it has another strong tool to just have a bomber on board, to have good synergies with the Empire Strikes. And I think with those two lists, I think J-King is going to ban at least one of them. If I need to take a guess, it would be the Resistance deck maybe. But I think Freddie has a good chance here today.
So now we've seen in the past, I don't know how many OCCs, that Brit Air is just the default ban. So Darkness, Spooz just mentioned that may potentially not be the case here. Maybe Resistance, which is, again, something a little bit frustrating to play against, might be the ban. What do you think in here? Do you think that gets cut, or is just Brit Air too versatile to want to deal with?
From my experience out of KARDS esports, I would ban Resistance because I kinda hate it. Of course, banning Brit Air is always a good option here, and this is where the mind games are starting, because it's a different scenario if Freddie expects to get his air banned or his Resistance banned to looking at the bans towards J-King here. In the end, my personal decision would be I would ban Freddie's Resistance, and from J-King's side, for J-King, I go with Spooz and would ban and control deck, but I would ban German-Italy control because I think this is more polished than J-King's singleton deck list.
Well, we do have the ban, so let's go take a look and see exactly who was right here. So Freddie's Brit Air is actually going to be banned, so we will see that resistance deck, and then there's J King's control list. So Darkness, look like you got that one. That Singleton, we may see it, but it's going to be interesting. And I think we're actually jumping into this game a couple turns in already, and things are already not looking great for J King.
We skipped like the first 2 turns. And yeah, Freddie is having the Yak 7 on the battlefield, drawing him more cards and reducing the deployment cost of the 34th guards. So this looks very good for him here. J King on the other side has decisive defense activated and may will trigger it this turn if Freddie chooses to attack with the T80. And there it is. Freddie is able to not only attack but kill it using 2 bloody sickles to reduce the operation cost of the 34th guards to 0 and dropping them. It's turn 4 and J King has a big problem here.
Yeah, I mean, J King has the hammer here, right, to get rid of one of them. What is the leftmost? It's a lion forward A. So he has the tools in hand to remove 2 of those 6/6s. And yeah, Freddie only having the KV1 as another threat for turn 6 in hand. So for now, I think J King has a good chance to just hold the pressure here to resist it, and then yeah, maybe develop a board on his own, right? With Ladeshima later on and also the armored train. So he has the tools he needed in hand.
Yes, but Freddie is getting constant card draw and setting up a Yura play here. Armored train looks nice, but Yura and those units, it's a ton of damage. How much damage is that? 9, 12, 14. Is this lethal?
Winter Warfare, counter-offensive, Ura. Is this enough credits to attack additionally?
No, he can't have credits to attack, but with Red Dawn, he can reduce damage, HP of the armored train down to 4. So he needs 19. This is lethal. With Yura, Red Dawn onto armored train and attack with everyone. This is lethal for J King. Lethal for J King, and Freddie could win here immediately.
So let's see if Freddie is able to see that one. Definitely doing the math here. There comes the Ura. Mon Nostrum additionally.
Yura,
there's...
Oh, wait, no, I think I miscalculated this with the healing effect of
the Engineer's Battalion. Yeah, I see. Yeah. But still, it's J King not in the best spot in the world here. Down to 3. Only has the Alpini Regiment, but that is not too much. J King with the Saros Gate here, able to pin one of them at least. He's also able to kill it. He has a line forward A. But he needs to kill at least 2 of them, if not all of them. Because we know that Freddie has 2 Winter Warfares.
What about the 7th Alpini Regiment? If Freddie has to trade into it, J King will get healed for 4 plus... Well, never mind. This will kill the big threats as well. It's a little less risky.
So Freddie won off here, actually. No, he has lethal with the Mon Nostrum. He can do Mon Nostrum on the Yak, attack, and then do double Winter Warfare, and then he wins. Is he able to see that one?
Yes. Mon Nostrum, attack, double Winter Warfare.
Wow, that turn earlier was really strong with the Uras. That Ura is such a strong card, and there we go. Freddie already with the 1-0 lead here. J King not really... I mean, he had the tools in hand, but somehow it was just too much stuff going on. And that Ura just, yeah, wow.
That's kind of the challenge when you're playing a singleton deck as well, right? You've got all kinds of tools, but how do you establish any type of board presence or any type of control? Otherwise, you're just playing the defensive the whole time. And Freddie happened to have the perfect hand in that scenario to just come back and push with the Ura, with the Winter Warfares and everything to finish them off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We just saw what can happen if self-damage has a good start, and the 2/6/6 on turn 4, it's as we saw, hard to deal with, especially when there was early damage already dealt to the HQ, and then just one Ura can just seal your fate there.
Now we see J aggro against Resistance. I mean, J King has to win twice against Japan Resistance, and Soviet control is a little bit better against it compared to J aggro, in my opinion. So J King tries to get the hard matchup first, because you have a lot of early units, a lot of low HP units, and Freddie has just a ton of answers for it. Here choosing to kill the Bicycle Regiment with For Honor.
I was probably afraid of a Type 93, right? So against Jagro, you always want to have...
he has Imperial Decree, so he's able to kill the tank no matter what. But yeah, the Bicycle Regiments have way more damage output. J-King, top decking the key. Airplanes are usually very strong against Japan Resistance, but after the introduction of
to the colonies, yeah.
Defend in Depth.
Defend in Depth, yeah.
Yeah. Japan Resistance has a powerful tool against those big airplanes. Like we just saw, Freddie's able to handle that as well.
Exactly 5 cards in J-King's hand. Oh, that's so painful.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them is a Resistance card.
Yeah, that made the difference there.
It sure did. Some damage output from the Rebel Wind. Looking good for Freddie here. Call to the Colonies is just going for the HP. Next turn, Freddie can pin everything with naval operations. And after that, he can banzai most of the units. Well, not the Archie. Archie will be a problem.
Yeah, and we also just see the big strengths of Japan Resistance, right? It's not just all the board clear, it's also just all this healing in the deck. Like triple Call to Colonies, Liberation can offer you so much more HP that you just need to get into the late game, where you can play Imperial Decrees, Naval Operations combos to just board wipe after board wipe, and then J-King is just left with nothing on board and probably in hand later on. But I think at this spot, J-King has a good chance here, because that IG is very hard for Freddie to remove. I mean, he has double Tora.
This IG is impossible to remove for Freddie right here.
No, he has double Tora, right?
Yeah, but the spawning, he has also Imperial Decree and Tora. So he would kill it 1 time, but he gets a second bomber with even more attack. So this is a real problem, not being able to deal with this remaining bomber. So Freddie could choose to just drop the Shiden here to prevent the bomber from attacking. Naval Operation is strong too, prevents the Wirbelwand from attacking, and kills the Type 97 or 93? Type 93 to
93,
get rid of the buff.
So Freddie needs another Tora or another Imperial Decree just to get rid of everything.
Imperial Decree, Tora, killing everything and dropping the Shiden to protect against the bomber.
I think that's what we're going to see here, yeah. Banzai not that strong, because IG would survive. Could also keep it for later. So what other line is Freddie checking about here? He's going for it.
Maybe Banzai. It's a lovely card.
Jaking's hand is not look. Oh, okay, never mind. Another 35T. So if you're Jaking, you're just going all in, drop everything on board, go for face damage. Or do you hold anything
kill the
back?
Sheeden with trading 3 units into it. But that's not the nature of J aggro. I guess he's going aggressive here. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice. He has to go aggressive and has to hope the 3 remaining cards are not containing a ton of board clear. So actually he could hold one Panzer 35T. Wait, is he going to trade into the Sheeden?
Looks like, right?
I did not expect that. Well, Freddie has a lot of heal in theory.
Yeah, also if Jaking just goes face here and Freddie just finds another Imperial Decree Tora, he emptied his board and has a Sheeden on board, and then Jaking has no other way to deal with it. So I think it was a smart move to just remove it. Both have an empty board now, and if Jaking is ever able to find a faint retreat, he's maybe having a chance for a comeback here.
Maybe. But it looks like Jaking is playing to not lose. Maybe going all in would have been statistically the better option to hopefully grind down Freddie as long as he did not find card draw. But again, Freddie has so many tools and options. It's just a nightmare for J aggro here. And he even holds 3 removal cards. Jaking still not finding any Feint Retreat, any Arado.
Yeah, the only thing he can do here is drop type 93 and Befehlswagen go face and hope for the best. That Kabanishi has a lot of HP, I mean.
It sure has.
So is Jaking running Sendai regiments in that list?
Let me check.
Yeah, he's running 2 copies of it.
Okay.
There is a Siren.
But I mean, with Naval Operation, it already deals 3 damage to everything. And Kabanishi starts to slowly grind down the HP.
Yeah, only
Dina.
16 more turns. Oh, Dinah is a good catch here. And the type 94. But is this ever enough to grind Freddie down here?
Would you pin this to protect the cavalry regiment? I think it's a good idea.
So both players kind of in top deck mode right now. I mean, Freddie has the Banzai, but cannot get rid of the Dinah with it. But still an awkward hand here. Do you play the last rites or do you just wait? I mean, with the Kabanishi on board, it would not be too bad to draw the Kamikazes, right?
Yeah, I think those Kamikazes are good. Freddie should have enough credits to operate, to play those last rites. Because Jaking is in a desperate top deck scenario.
What can Freddie do here?
Kamikaze and Banzai.
I mean, but isn't Banzai better once Jaking finds Feint Retreat maybe? To just have a very strong board clear just in case?
So Jaking can flat the board and everything's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jaking with another 1-drop here with 12 credits to spend. Not really what you want to see.
But he's able to kill the Kabanishi and damage the Siren. Actually, this is really good for Jaking. Being able to operate, being able to kill things.
Liberation will only heal for 4. Might see the Banzai.
It feels like it's necessary to play Banzai here.
Yeah, leaves
You could have-
checking with one attack bomb fighter there.
Oh,
Befehlt.
Panzerfilzwagen. This is so bad for J-King.
At this point, is J.K. looking for anything else but the feigned retreat? What else is in his list that he's really hoping to draw here?
Sheeden? He
Cheating.
still has Sheeden.
Yeah, she didn't know.
Bombing raid would be kinda okay. 22nd Infantry Regiment also gives card draw.
Oh, Key is also a good top deck here for Freddie. But J King also played his key.
We will give J-King more cards. This could become problematic. But also Freddie will get more cards. And he has like a big fighter with 5 HP, 6 damage. That is threatening J-King. A little bit of heal. That's a Sendai Regiment. No hesitation. Sendai Regiment is taking away this one. And J-King is removing a little bit of those resistance cards. Taking some damage.
But only one of them. Why is he keeping 3 of them? What might be the reason for that? And why not play all of them?
J-King has actually the risk of dying through burn like Kamikaze. So he don't want to play all of them. And with Feint Retreat, he's running out of cards. So
why not keep all 4 of them then?
Because Liberation is giving Freddie even more HP with more cards.
Makes sense.
So there's a reason for everything and for nothing, basically.
Okay, now we see kind of a punish for keeping the Liberation card, the Resistance cards in hand. Like J-King is drawing 4 less cards now from the phony war. But yeah, it makes sense to keep some of them in hand for the named reasons. But yeah, he drew just
Sendai.
4 less cards now. Sendai gone.
Yeah, but it's Feint Retreat. Feint Retreat is able to get rid of all resistance cards. That's a positive thing here. And J-King is going for the desperate measures. He's finding it. 50% chance. God, J-King being able to kill the key 83 and probably discarding his hand at this point. The Archie is valuable. Is very
that's the
valuable.
question. Yeah, the Aichi is a very strong card in that matchup, but also the Feint Retreat is so
he has to play the Feint.
Yeah, that's really tough. One of the strongest cards in his deck right now, the Aichi. And he's going for it. Oh my god.
He's going for the Aichi. I strongly
I mean, he's
disagree.
also down to how many cards is he having left in the deck? Maybe 10, 11? So the Feint is sure the only option to win here, maybe, but can you win without Aichi on board? That's the other question.
Well, look at this Liberation. It completely blocks J-King's hand. He's not able to draw anything. He will overdraw. And Freddie just has the tools to clear the board with desperate measures and bombing raid. And he healed for 9 with Liberation. Could have been just 3. So I think Feint Retreat would have been so much better.
Yeah, seeing the outcome of just playing the Aichi over Feint Retreat might be correct that the Feint would have denied a lot of healing there for Freddie and also would have gave J-King way more tools this turn now.
But to be fair, J-King made Feint Retreat most successful, most efficient by discarding 8 resistance cards. So that's something. That's something. But with this questionable last play, I'm sure he will disagree with me and completely destroy me in an argument if I talk about this with him. And his singleton deck, he's out of the tournament.
I'm before we dive into this, I'm gonna Mark Theus, our producer. Can we get J King here to explain what made him bring a singleton deck? Because I would love to know if there was some meaning behind that we missed. So we'll see if we can get J King over here to talk about that. But what an upset! Our first match of this new kind of format, and we see Freddie go through with. I mean, Darkness, you called it a resistance list that's just not fun to play against. And then J King bringing a singleton deck that has us all scratching our heads. I guess based on like looking at the deck list, I think Spooz, did you come back afterwards, see the matchups and go, yeah, you know what? Surprising based on the names of the players, but based on what they brought, yeah, this kind of makes some sense.
I mean, yeah. First of all, I was a little bit surprised of the bans that J King banned the Brit Air list. But as Darken mentioned, I think you probably always ban Brit Air. I think it was a very tough decision there for J King to decide whether to ban Brit Air or Resistance. And then we just saw the result. What Resistance can do when you don't find the proper tools and when you just get your board wiped after round after round. It's really frustrating to play against, and then you have your opponent down to, I think it was down to 11, could have been 7 if you would have gone face with the 35 Ts. But then we just saw what called Colonies and Liberation, what those cards can do. Suddenly you're back up to 20, and it's so frustrating to play against. But yeah, good shot here for Freddie. He's in his first appearance in this new OCC format, at least semifinals. Not too bad, and that against the 2-time world champion, definitely an achievement in itself.
That's got to give you some confidence moving forward. Let's bring up the bracket and see what we got going on here. So we've got Freddie defeating J King 2-0, moving on to the semis. We have Tiger, as you mentioned, over Zia Lang, as Zia Lang had to pull out. So Tiger is our second semifinalist. Next up, if we can hopefully get J King here, we'll have Berto taking on No in 5 in just a second. Here we are getting ready for our next matchup. We're going to have Berto versus Noin, but you may notice a new addition to the casting desk. Out of pure curiosity, we've asked J King to join us to explain what the heck just happened in his last matchup.
Well, I decided I wanted to bring a singleton deck to this tournament, just because something different. It's never been done before. It was sort of a thought experiment, really, when you're building a Soviet control. You have a lot of single cards you want to run already, so it wasn't too much of a stretch to make it all single cards. And in practice games, it worked quite well. Unfortunately, that is not what we saw play out in the tournament, though.
Well, we appreciate you nonetheless being a good sport and going ahead and hanging out with us for a couple more of these quarterfinal games as we get ready here for Berto and Noin. Let's take a look at the players. Also, hey Darkness. Sorry, I didn't say hello. I got distracted because J King was here, fanboying over the fellow Canadian.
You know, I'm here since the intro and the first match, so
I know,
you
but
don't need to greet me again.
I just, it's nice to talk to you, Darkness. I appreciate having you here. But let's move on. Let's move forward. We've got Berto Burrito here. He's our first profile for this quarterfinal, completing 447 matches, 81.43% win rate, finishing first last season. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of credit for him finishing first, since last time we casted an OCC and I forgot to mention that I believe he was third or second or something. So I'd like to think that, that fueled his drive into first place here with bombing rate as his favorite card. J King, I know both you and Darkness, part of Team Ammo with Berto. Any thoughts on Berto as he was preparing for this matchup? I assume he didn't bring a singleton deck, J King?
No, Berto's plan for this OCC was definitely to bring just the 3 most meta aggro decks he could. Just the decks he's most comfortable on. Don't take any big risks. Don't try to test around with new control decks. Just bring what he knows, bring what he's played on ladder.
Right on. Let's take a look at the deck list since we have them here. It looks like US frontline, looks like some Brit Air, and looks like, is that kind of an aggro list? Yeah, that's an aggro, like a Jaggro list, right?
Yes. This is US German midrange, Britain Japan Air and Japan German aggro with a combined 47 one-cost cards across the 3 decks. These are 100% aggro. That is the game plan.
Darkness, we talked a little bit, I believe it was the last OCC, about, having Japan with Brit Air. There was, what's the other variation that we saw last OCC? I'm blanking on it now that I brought it up.
We saw Brit with US Air 95. I guess was bringing it, featuring the bombers and going more towards the mid game and a little bit more stable compared to that version. Brit Japan Air is definitely a little bit faster and a little bit more aggro.
To J King's point, yeah, you've got that pressure, you got the air superiorities in there and all that good stuff. I also appreciate Berto's finger gun profile picture. Really, really loving that. Let's move on to Noen and check out his player profile before we dive into Noen's decks. Again, no stranger to the OCC. Finishing 20th, did go through the qualifiers, playing 600 matches. Crazy that a 73% win rate ends up having you finish 20th, but Noen, the absolute champ that he is, managed to make it through the qualifiers and is, facing a tall order, going head to head with the first place finisher of last season, Berto Burrito. Let's get right into Noen's deck so we can get you into the action here. Darkness, why don't you take a quick breakdown of what we got going on with Noen?
Well, his first deck is an air deck. It's Brit US Air, a little bit more mid-range, not as fast as Brit Japan Air from Berto. I have a deja vu here. The second one is US German Frontline. It's very popular among those Chinese esportlers. And the third is Noen's 5 Soviet US control deck with a little bit of ramp. I think he's still the only one bringing this to a tournament yet, at least in the recent times. So I'm definitely looking forward to see this control deck in action, especially because it's the only slower deck and even ramp deck among those both players.
Right on. So you have Berto, who's going to try and get in there as quickly as humanly possible. Noen bringing the one control list. Jaking, any other holes or gaps you see in the lineup that may make this head-to-head, either more challenging or a little bit easier on Noen's side?
Well, we've seen Noen bring this Soviet control deck into the last OCC, and we saw him sort of struggle a little bit on it. But I know he has been grinding on that deck the entirety of the season. That might be why he didn't place as high as he might normally have, because Soviet control is not the best deck for placing high on ladder, but he's definitely been getting a lot of practice on it. So I would expect that he has improved since last season and last tournament and has something to prove on it.
I would imagine as well that, as you mentioned, typically a control deck's probably a little bit more challenging on ladder, takes a bit more time, and there's still a plethora of aggro hanging out on the ladder. So likely probably seen a few faster decks in his time and might be, like you said, a little bit better prepared here to take on Berto's fairly aggressive lineup. So again, I want us to get right into the action. So let's take a look at the bans. Oh, shocking. Look at that. Brit Air band on both sides. Any surprises there, Darkness?
Not at all. Brit Air is very, very popular and very strong. And good against aggro decks, good against control decks. So no surprise here.
As they're pulling up their opening hands, J King, this Brit Air constantly getting banned. Is it just a question of it being that strong, or is it more of a question of it being that versatile that any matchup you queue into would end up being probably a little bit favored on the Brit Air side?
I think it's versatility. You can build specific decks that might be strong or at least okay into Britain Air, but it's very difficult to bring 3 decks that are good into it. In this case, Noen's Soviet deck I don't think is that strong into Britain Air, which is probably why he banned it.
And so we're going to have this matchup where you've got that Soviet control list you mentioned, J King, that Noen is going to be using and going to go up against a pretty quick deck. And Berto seems to have a pretty decent hand from that perspective as well, where he's going to be able to push fairly fast here going against this control list.
Noen 5 has a strong deck, strong start as well, with Bloody Sickle to kill like the cavalry regiment, War Machine to start the ramp early. He can go turn 2, the War Machine, into turn 3, Brian's Irregulars into the second War Machine. But he sent away the is it T60? T70?
Yes. T60.
So I'm a little bit unsure about that. If he gets the credit advantage now, and even more with the second one, he may run out of cards soon. But he already top decked 2 more removals. So the start for 9-5 looks quite strong here.
And that is the only confusion in Noen's deck, so that's a very important card for him to find, and it might be a card that Berto's less likely to play around, just because it is only a single copy.
This confusion is great to get rid of some things, and another first rifles here, and a second Bloody Sickle.
Wow.
9-5 is having so many options right now. And he found the Ewell factories, so he can steal the first Signal Regiment and upgrade it to get rid of it and prevent that grind of his HQ.
Destroying the first Signal Regiment here will be incredibly important for Noen because his deck doesn't have the most healing ever. And so far, he's already taken 6 damage from the Sickles and the Signal Regiment. However, the Aichi coming down, he'll have the choice between killing the Signal or getting rid of this very sticky bomber. However, with the red banner draw, he can remove one this turn and then remove the other the following turn if he so chooses.
Those are possible. Yeah, he's choosing the first Signal Regiment here, trading into the front line, destroying the... He got a fighter to block the bomber. That was, I think, the best outcome possible here for 9-5.
I'd like to highlight the choice of attacking with the Bryansk first before playing the Ural Factory. It just gets 1 extra damage in, and who knows, that could come down to deciding the game. It's these tiny little plays, optimizations that Noen's very good at.
He used the first Signal Regiment, kill his Bryansk Irregular to deal 1 damage. Berto is now 219, not very threatened currently. But yeah, you're right. Those little plays can be the decider at the end.
And Berto playing the Errata and finding the desperate measures. The only other order left in his deck now is Feigned, and I think he would probably much prefer to have found Feigned off of that Errata draw rather than this desperate measures, because his hand is starting to run out, and Noen's hand still has some pretty solid, powerful options left in there.
What's Noen's win condition in this matchup? Is it just hang around, outlast Berto, and then be able to make a push afterwards, or is there something I'm missing in this list that will really allow him to close out this game?
He needs to not die. He has a long breath. He has more units, more threats looking in the late game. So he needs to survive because Berto will run out of steam eventually. But surviving is not that easy against J aggro.
And there's a few key cards in Noen's deck that can help put out damage pretty quickly. There's no standalone win condition, but the 5th Ranger is pushed up as an 8/8, can end the game pretty quickly, or the KV-1 after a feigned retreat can also output a lot of damage. And very importantly, I mentioned earlier, Noen's deck does not have a lot of healing. That Engineers Battalion, I believe, is the only healing card in his deck. So finding that is going to be huge, considering he'd already lost half his health total, and now he's going to be getting healing off of every single one of these units.
As 9-5, would you play all of your cards now? Stealing the bomber, upgrading it to destroy it, and the Bloody Sickle to kill the Akita regiment?
Well, as the old adage goes, draw first. So, yeah, I agree with playing the Bloody Sickle first, and he finds Mobilization, which is a 1-of in his deck, and it finds him the 4th Bloody Sickle. These are very solid back-to-back draws for Noen. He now has the ability to kill either of these units if he wants, although the Aichi, of course, will come back in the form of the other Aichi. I think the double push up here is likely because he suspects Berto's going to be playing a Feigned on turn 6, or at least considering a Feigned on turn 6. So this way it allows him to output as much damage as possible if that Feigned does come out on turn 6.
Well, Berto's able to destroy the entire board with the Engineers Battalion first. This is not looking great for 9-5. Sure, he has the 39th Rifle Regiment and is able to take the bomber. But he's running out of HP. He's not having heal left, and Berto is playing J aggro, so there's a ton of small burn. And right now we are looking at the Sheeton as well.
And that 39th Rifle Regiment taking the Aichi is one of the most important interactions in this matchup. I played this matchup quite a lot with Berto, and that is one of the things that often could come down to deciding a game is, do the Soviets have to just kill both forms of the Aichi naturally, or do they have the 39th to just take it for this massive tempo swing? And with no one's pushing up all of his guards, choosing not to play any more guards, his HQ is open for this Scheiden. However, with the Partisans Red Banner or the Partisans Ural Factory, this Scheiden is not going to be able to deal any damage for Berto.
Not being able to attack, the poor Scheiden is getting stolen and upgraded, looks like, without attacking. He's using Ural Factories instead to get likely a 6k. 7k would be Kawanishi, the elite bomber.
It would be Kawanishi or Kika. For 6, he gets Tony.
Osaka Regiment is... No, it's 5.
Yeah, so... I mean, Tony is a pretty good outcome. Kika would be slightly better, but Kawani should be a lot worse. And either way, it's going to end the game because there's no way for Berto to come back in this.
And you talked about it as well, right? That 5th Ranger, even not being the 8-8, just the 4-4 out there, requires so much firepower for Berto to get through. His hand was running out. Minus Feigned Retreat, there was probably not a lot that could have saved him in that scenario.
Yeah, he needed the Feigned Retreat. And unfortunately for him, he drew the Desperate Measures, and that's just the what happens sometimes when you run the 3-order package, the 4-order package, is you're not finding this Feigned as consistently.
Exactly. So there you have that first game in the books. No-win leading 1-0. His Soviet deck will go through. Got the US Germany left with the Brit Air list banned, and Berto switching it up here. Going with that mid-range list instead. Is that a matchup choice here, knowing exactly what no one was bringing?
I mean, at this point in the game, Berto has to beat no one's US mid-range twice in a row with both of his decks. Mm-hmm. So I think he would rather take the mirror matchup first, since that is... Well, it's not necessarily the harder matchup. It's certainly the matchup that is going to be more of a mental strain, because sometimes it might feel like, oh, I just got unlucky. There was nothing I could do. So just getting this one out of the way, if you're going to lose it, you might as well lose it first.
Fair enough.
A valid strategy, definitely.
Both players with pretty solid hands. Berto's hand would be slightly better, but he is starting second, and you would much prefer to start first in this matchup. It's very difficult to understate how important starting first is, because it gives you control of the front line, which activates cards like Sherman, activates the 99th, gives you buffs off the combat engineers.
As a little Easter egg, if you will, because we see the deck list with the title, Berto has actually named this list Reminder, Go First.
The classic Berto humor.
Oh, correct. But that, to your point, J. King, that statement is not lost on Berto. I think that he's aware that he's probably in a little bit of a tough scenario here. But both players seem to have, good hands, kind of what they're looking for. Just it might be a question of having to get that front line back to, like you said, activate the Sherman and things that will really help push this deck forward.
I suspect we'll see a dive bombing coming out here from Berto, and there is a lot of room to make small inaccuracies, especially in the beginning of this game. And I think no one might have fallen into one of these mistakes where you're spending too many credits pushing units to the front line rather than developing your support line, because there's not enough credits for Berto to play strategic bombing or stars and stripes. So your units are essentially safe in the support line. So you want to be able to get as many units out as quickly as possible, so you're able to move as many units as quickly as possible into the front line on later turns when you're worried about those stars and stripes. But if you move them in too early, you can lead to these massive tempo swings like we're seeing now, where a second dive bombing is going to let Berto take the front line and leave no one with just 2 units left on board.
So speaking to that point, J King, does it still make sense for no one, let's say, to move something to the front line, block it off, try and keep control of it, make Berto expend credits if he wants to clear it out, and then develop? Or would you say, hey, let's stick to the support line for now, and we'll move everything forward all at once?
It is important to move one unit to the front line because it's very important to try to make sure your opponent cannot get a Red Devils to the front line. That is the key card that can just absolutely strangle your opponent out in this mirror matchup. So as long as you're certain your opponent could not get a Red Devils to the front line, you don't want to move anything else up there, at least in the first 4 or 5 turns of the game. And as we see, Berto's getting his Red Devils up there now. And I mean, no one can retreat it for 4 credits with the half track, or you can double trade into it, but that's another 4 credits. And there's just not many easy ways for him to get rid of this.
No, this is really bad for 9-5. He's just going to turtle up, making his units a little bit more sticky. Those dive bombings were the key for Berto to be able to get back into this game. I think 9-5 did not had a lot of options next to playing units and sending them into the front line, because he was going first and he had to use this frontline advantage, but he's running a little bit low. He was running a little bit low on options. So Berto was able to get that swing.
I really like that play there from Berto, where you see he has the option to Sherman, he has the option to attack face for 5, but he chooses to just put as many more units onto the board as possible, putting another 5th Rangers into the front line, because he knows there's absolutely no way no one can take the front line on the following turn. So Berto can always Sherman in the future. He is certain of this. So in the present, it's better to actually develop the front line and develop your ability to trade out with your opponent rather than just drawing the first chance you get.
A second combat engineers. Berto's not only able to send 2 more infantry regiments into the front line, but the Panzer 35T and those infantry units are getting +2 damage if he chooses to play the Panzer 35T, of course. That's a lot of damage.
The credits are starting to look a little awkward here for Berto, because he can just play the Sherman to draw. However, if that was his plan, he likely would have wanted to draw first. He can play the Skytrain, but that risks putting 4 units in your support line. So a Stars and Stripes could theoretically completely destroy his support line. Or he had the choice to do 35T, buffed twice by the combat engineers, to trade with the 5th Rangers. Fortunately for him, no one does not have the Stars and Stripes in hand at the moment. So he is going to be forced to just trade out with these units the old-fashioned way.
Trading out the old-fashioned way, but playing against the Skytrain is not the greatest option for 9-5 here. He would love to get some draw from Sherman, but he's not able to get a unit into the front line and use that Sherman draw power.
He actually has some pretty interesting options here. If he wants, he can get a 3-3 Whirlwind to the front line. He can take out this 463rd Infantry Battalion, I believe it's called. I think he might even be able to Sherman this turn.
Is he
maybe
able
not
to
quite.
Sherman?
No,
I don't
he's
think,
1 or 2 credits off being able to Sherman, but he has the choice to either trades out the Whirlwind. That's very interesting to me. He also had the choice to retreat the 4-1 back to hand because the support line was full. And Berto, knowing that he can no longer guarantee the front line in the following turns, now is when he plays his Sherman. Now is when he gets his card draw and cashes out on that.
And killing the engineers battalion. I really like that. But this means 9-5 will be able to get the Sherman draw next turn. No, wait a second.
He can
This just blocked it?
he can still get the Sherman draw with half track, but it will be very inefficient.
Look at his hands. He just ruined Blitzkrieg. 9-5 really needs the card draw. Desperately. It was the only choice to make here.
And these are some relatively low impact cards in no one's hand right now, and this is not when he needs these. He's looking for his 5th Rangers he can drop as 8/8s. And he's looking for strategic bombing, Stars and Stripes to take out this Skytrain, clear the support line once and for all, but that's not what he has. And if we look over at Berto's hand, he's played to the 2nd Sherman, he has the 3rd Sherman in hand, he has the Stars and Stripes if no one tries to flood in the support line.
And that Panzer is not what he wanted to draw either. There's just nothing impactful in no one's hand to really be able to make a meaningful push here. And even if he does, he's already played the Sherman. There's really not a lot he can do.
And I've just double checked no one's deck list. He doesn't actually run Stars and Stripes. This is one of the risks of when you cut these cards that might not be useful in every matchup. They're somewhat tech cards. Is you can end up in these situations where you really wish you had not cut the tech card, because there are these games where that tech card is the thing you need. And here, another slight mistake from no one. He was able to play the 35T before trading the infantry, which would have let him take out the Skytrain with the 2 attacks from the 35Ts. But unfortunately, he traded the infantry first, so he could not get the operation cost reduction.
Yeah, this was a minor mistake. He chose to send the Sherman into the front line instead, meaning that Berto had to sacrifice his Sherman to trade out and get back into the front line. But the Skytrain lives, and this Hellcat is able to trade efficient. Berto gets another infantry regiment, and 9-5 has no frontline unit, no board unit left, so the Sherman is relatively useless. It's just in 4/4 body with 2 operation costs, and Berto has so many more options here.
And this is why I love this mirror matchup so much. It's turn 11 in a pretty aggressive mirror match, and neither player has attacked the enemy HQ a single time. Both players are at full health, +3 from no one's we can do it. And the game's as good as over. It's completely does not matter about going face. It is entirely down to getting the efficient trades, controlling the front line to get the extra card draw off the Shermans. And that's what we've seen Berto be doing the entire game.
Yeah, the last one was not card draw at all for 9-5. Berto drew so much more cards here, and 9-5 is out of options. This Blitzkrieg does not do anything. 5th Rangers is able to trade 1 single unit. He chooses the 8/8 body, so he's able to trade efficient, still sticking to the plan. But Berto is able to send it back, send his own 8/8 unit into the front line. 9-5 is calling it. He's saying thank you. He may just surrender after his next card draw, because look at how much units there are for Berto Burrito in the front line. The front line is full, and 9-5 does not has AoE. The stack does not has carpet bombing or any possibility to get rid of everything. So yeah, this game is over.
And Berto ties it up pretty convincingly. I think he just had a better handle on what he needed to do in that mirror matchup.
And like you said, J. King, there's a few small errors that maybe no one made. Even just not knowing the nuances of the mirror matchup, like you're saying, maybe pushing to the front line too quickly, then, not having the or having your units taken out and you have nothing left to kind of keep control of it. So getting there first is important, but keeping control of it is, the critical piece here. We're going to have Berto coming back with the Jagro deck going up against the US list that no one just played.
And we see Berto has Feigned Retreat in hand. I'm not sure if he kept this in his mulligan or he just drew this off the mulligan. But that's going to be a pretty important card if this game goes later. And looking at his hands so far, the Signal Regiment is very difficult for Noen's US-German deck to remove. However, Berto does not have quite as an explosive start as a Jagro is able to have. And these 30 seconds are going to slow it down quite a bit.
And this Greyhound as well, and 1-3 buddy in the front line is usually a nightmare for J-Aggro. Arado is going to draw the last order, its bombing rate, and first Signal Regiment is deployed. He will start to grind down Noen 5's HQ from now on, but Noen 5 going to develop the Skytrain, getting like a constant threat starting, and with this Blitzkrieg in hand, Noen 5 looks very strong here, and Berto Burrito with J-Aggro almost on the back foot, with the back to the wall.
And in this matchup, it's very close to 50-50 between the two decks, in my opinion, because it does just come down a lot to these early turns. Jagro, how much damage is Jagro able to get out? Are they able to finish the game off with Signal Regiment? Are they able to pull off the Feigned? And from the US's perspective, they're trying to survive the initial wave and then set up a big Blitzkrieg board so that as soon as the Feigned comes out, they're able to just push face for lethal damage with a big Blitz turn. And so far, no one looks like he's much more comfortable at achieving that goal. However, this board is going to likely be dealt with pretty easily by desperate measures. The bombing raid also works fine here. It's not quite as clean. He could even just use Raiding Brigade and save the desperate measures for the following turn.
Noen 5 played beautiful around bombing raid. The Skytrain to the left of the HQ and the Red Devils, who requires 5 credits for the bombing raid in the middle of the other 2 units. Bombing raid seems like a good solution here to simply get rid of the Skytrain now without wasting the additional damage of bombing raid. So I agree a lot with this play.
And Berto choosing to go for the Raiding Brigade on Skytrain and just taking the trade with the Arado. Very interesting because he was not able to fully remove all of the cards either way, so there wasn't necessarily a way to stop Sherman. However, you could have certainly slowed it down. And Noen here, Berto almost left a trap for Noen, because from Noen's perspective, he might be thinking, well, if he had the desperate measures, he would have played it. So he doesn't have desperate measures. I'm going to play out my hand to set up for a we can do it. And of course, Berto does have desperate measures, and that takes out 3 units.
And damaging the other 2 remaining. So bombing raid is able to get rid of those. Strategic bombing is also very strong, killing the artillery and the infantry unit, damaging the Signal Regiment. And of course, removing 1 credit slot. I'm sure Berto would love to have that back.
And this just looks like an easy bombing raid from my perspective. Unfortunately for Noen, after the desperate measures, this setup works very much against him with the 2 1-health units on either side, meaning Berto can go face for 3 with this bombing raid if he so chooses.
Yes, indeed. It's exactly 4 credits, so Berto's unable to develop a board next to it. But Noen 5 is running out of options, and Berto has to stop Noen 5 from getting more cards against a potential Sherman. So bombing raid looks definitely the best option here, and it deals 3 damage to the HQ, killing those units next to it. And there's a Sherman top draw. Berto just did something really, really important here to deny Noen 5 more options with the Sherman. Look at that. the first signal regiment is sent back. It's fully healed now, and 0-5 just drops the Sherman to get something onto the field. Half track. What do you think about half track? Playing 2 times here to.
I think the problem with playing half track, playing both half tracks and saving the Sherman, is it's too easily responded to by just Akita's cavalry regiments. A Whirlwind would be quite strong at preventing them from being able to make it into the support line on the following turn. However, with the we can do it and the massive credit lead over Berto, sorry. I think it was probably worth taking that risk. Either way, he does end up with the 2-5 half tracks on the board. But now he lacks the Showman in hand, and Berto's had a few more turns to develop. And
to develop more units.
Yeah, Dina drawing the 1-cost units is exactly what he wants when he's so low on credits, is he can just play out so many of these. And the 3 in the front line all have 0 operation cost. And this is almost as good as game. I mean, no one's running low on resources. He's running low on health. He had to retreat the signal regiment, so it's back to full health, meaning it can no longer be picked off by a dive bomb-in. And Berto just has this famed retreat sitting in hand, waiting to be played at the first opportunity he gets.
Yeah, 9-5 is getting pretty low. With the right cards, he's maybe able to get back into the match, just from the unit perspective, but he's simply running out of HP.
Berto can drop Noan to 2 health this turn, and Noan just does not have a card in his deck that removes the signal regiment anymore. Really, the only way is strategic bombing plus dive bombing, and the strategic bombing's been played.
And of course, there's a Shiden in Berto's hand, so 9-5 can trade a little bit, but this will finish him off. And yeah, this is over. GG. Berto just won against 9-5.
Yeah, quite the comeback too.
Absolutely. That first game did not go well for Berto, but pretty commanding second and third match victories there, moving Berto into the semifinals, taking on Tiger there. Obviously, we had mentioned that Zia Lang ended up dropping from the event, unfortunately. So you got Berto and Tiger. You see Freddie, and we're going to find out who that fourth semi-finalist with Moy taking on Head in just a few moments. But before we get there, gents, any other thoughts on this matchup? You know, Jaking, you called it a pretty big comeback. Are we, based on the matchup, based on the deck list, are we surprised that happened?
Not necessarily. I think Berto's very aggressive lineup, it just always had chances into any of these decks. I think he had no terrible matchups across the board, and he has truly mastered all of the decks that he's brought to this tournament. So there was no doubt in my mind that he always had the ability to do that. And I think the fact that he did do that is a big milestone for him, because he's not always had the best success in OCCs, and I know he feels that he does not get given as much recognition as maybe he thinks he deserves, because he's been third at Worlds. He's been consistently placing in these top 6s, around the top 6, and this season he came in, he won the month, and now he came here and he beat Noan in the first round.
And I definitely think there's probably something to be said from a psychological perspective as well, right? As you were mentioning, like, hey, maybe I don't get the credit I deserve. And then you go into your first game in the quarterfinals and you lose. You go, damn, okay, I have to turn this around. And did a phenomenal job doing so. Like I said, I think it was 2 pretty convincing victories in the second and third matchup there. Darkness, any thoughts or anything you want to add before we wrap up that second quarter and move into our final one?
Looking at the matchups, I was expecting Berto winning against the Soviet ramp list, because it lacks more card draw, and if you don't find the right options, I tried it myself on ladder, you just lose against aggro by not having the right cards at the right time. But 9-5 was able to play with this deck very well and able to beat Berto in the first place. So yeah, it was a great comeback for Berto, like Jackie mentioned. But congratulations to him. It was an amazing run of Berto here.
We have got Moy versus Head. Let's bring up the player profiles and learn a little bit more about who we got going on here. So first up, you see Moy here. I believe their second consecutive different C this time around. It's the Clash, not the Championship, but same principle. They've showed up twice here, finishing third, 75% win rate. Really, really solid performance here by Moy, hailing from South America, from Peru, if I got that correct. Let's dive into their deck list. Actually, why don't we break down Moy's deck list first, and then we'll take a look at Head. So Darkness, why don't you run us through what we see here? It's looking like a little bit of the same as to what we saw in our last quarterfinal.
Yeah, this matchup, this lineup looks a lot like Berto's. You see here the US-German frontline deck, very fast, very centered around the front line, with the Blitzkrieg, of course, and a lot of 1 credit and 2 credit units. Small, minor differences. For example, Patrol, I don't think Berto is running this card. Second, J-Aggro, Japan, Germany, also very fast, very aggressive with Feigned Retreat. He's also having some minor differences. For example, Moy is running 3 times Akita Regiment, not only 1 compared to Berto Burrito. And I think he's running Bombing Raid and Zacian and the Retreat, all the necessary orders and elite cards. And last but not least, it's Brit, Japan, Air, also very fast, very aggressive. Maybe some minor differences to Berto's lists, but from the general lineup, it's all aggressive. All, like J-King explained, there are so many 1 credit cards among those 3 decks. The tactic is very clear here from Moy. He's going aggressive too.
With a heavily aggressive lineup like this, like let's say J-King, if you were going head to head and you saw this aggressive lineup, would you be more comfortable with some control tools and some control lists, or would you say, hey, it's probably better to fight fire with fire in this scenario and just outplay them with an equally aggressive lineup?
Speaking personally, I think I would rather have control, because I do tend to build my control to beat these types of decks, these types of lineups where I'm running a lot of these anti-aggro tools. But I know other players much prefer their controls with these much heavier units, these controls that are able to go late into the game and start dropping bombs after bombs. And those types of decks will do very, very poorly into Moy's lineup. And I think just generally people are, at the end of the day, are more comfortable on aggro. It's what they play more of on ladder. It's what they see more of on ladder. So yeah, I think just aggro into aggro, take the mirror matchups and try to outplay your opponent is the most common and proven method at beating these sort of meta lineups.
Would you think similarly, Darkness, or do you have a different approach you would take if you were going into that that aggro heavy lineup?
Well, I do like those heavy control decks with dropping bombs after bombs and going into the 30 minutes or longer matches. And yeah, they are not that great against aggro. You're just getting run over. So you make a lot of sacrifices among those big threats to play an anti-aggro version. And even with those versions, it's not a guaranteed win. It's still relatively even to the meta aggro decks like Brit Air, like J-Aggro. Anything can happen in those matches. So I agree with J-King. I think I would rather have similar good meta decks like those actual aggro meta decks right here, compared to tech decks against them, who would lose in a lot of times if your opponent brings something unexpected.
It's funny, as I asked the question, I immediately realized which two people I was asking the question to and thought maybe I won't get the most diverse answer, but I do appreciate the two of you kind of walking me through the full thought process, because I think that did clarify a whole bunch. So to that point, let's take a look and see exactly what Head is bringing. But before that, let's dive into the player cards. So there you've got Head with the wonderful flow, finishing 6th this season, 77% win rate. Again, nothing to scoff at there. 359 matches, so also being very, very efficient with what they're doing on ladder. So finishing in that last spot that gets them the automatic qualification to the Officers Club Clash. Let's take a look at Head's decks here. So J King, why don't you walk us through it? There's something a little bit different in this lineup.
Yeah, for sure. So the first two decks are decks we've certainly seen before. It is the Japan-German aggro and the Britain-Japan air. These are decks that we've seen from Berto and Urumoy, respectively. But the third deck, it's another Soviet control deck, but unlike Noen's Soviet-US ramp-style control, this is the Soviet-France control, which is a personal favorite of mine. I really like the deck, and it's really just playing a lot of units. It's a very unit-heavy deck, and it's using the second Rima as sort of this way to build powerful unit-based boards that might otherwise be full of lower-impact units that, when given mobilized, become much bigger threats over time.
I guess for me, the question comes down to, do we just see Brit airband on both sides once again?
I would fully expect Urumoy to ban the Soviet deck because it has the 2 Scorched Earths in there. It has the 3 Bryansk regiments. We spoke about control decks. You might have a deck that's layering bomb after bomb, but this is definitely the deck that is built ready to answer aggro. And there's also the 2 Petliakovs, which can just completely shut out US midrange. Soviet France has a near 90% win rate into US midrange. Just, if Petliakov hits the board and is protected, the game's over. So I would fully expect that Soviet deck to just be banned, taken out of the way, and you've played against Jago, you've played against Brit Air, you know how to play against those decks.
So is that similar thought process for you, Darkness? Let me play the matchups I'm familiar with, even if I'm maybe not favored. Let me take the ones I've probably seen a little bit more often and then ban the one that's probably not going to go so well.
Yeah, definitely. This is a strategy a lot of players choose, and I agree with them every single time. If you're not comfortable with the matchup, looking at other decks, looking at your own decks, you have a great disadvantage compared to you fully know the nuances of those matchups. So definitely agree here.
Well, let's find out exactly what was banned, and we'll see if J King and Darkness have it. And look at that. Got 2 absolute professionals here with me. So you see the Soviet France band on Head side. You got the Brit Air band on Moy side. No surprise there. So let's get into the matchup and see exactly what we've got in this first head-to-head. No pun intended. But we've got that U.S. front line going up against Head's Jagro list here. Anybody have the real advantage, or does it come down to in a certain spot, like to your point, J King, U.S. frontline not going first and Jagro potentially drawing a good opening hand?
I think that this is a very close matchup. I think it might lean slightly towards US midrange with the builds with the Greyhounds. However, it's very much dependent on the beginning of the game. And as we see, not the best hand ever from Urumoy. However, with this dive bombing coming out, Head's hand's not looking too great either. And this is a matchup that we saw for the final game of the Berto versus Noen series, and we saw Jago take it. So we certainly know that that's a possibility. This Greyhound taking out the cavalry regiment, it's looking towards Urumoy's favor at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Had already lost 1 credit turn 2, not able to use it. The other option would have been just dropping the 22nd Infantry Regiment without getting a card draw. Maybe this could have been the better option, but the Greyhound would have ended up in the front line from Urumoy. So this is not a great option as well, because Head would have struggled against that anyway. Yeah, it really comes down to the first turns, and Head finally able to drop the Panzer 35T and getting a card draw here seems almost desperate and much needed to be able to get more options.
And that 5th range is a great draw because not only does it just come down, remove the 35T, there's not really a way to stop 22nd from drawing again, but it now has a 0 operation cost body on the board that is able to respond to any other units Head plays. However, Head has the Desperate Measures, which is going to take out both of these units and leave Urumoy in a much worse position. And things are starting to slip away for him.
I was going to say that's kind of the challenge here, right? With Umoy trying to stabilize the board is, things like the Akita Regiment are still doing damage to you. So you're maybe stabilizing or slowing things down, but your health total is still taking a bit of a beating.
The one thing he has going for him at this point is the fact that Head's hand is quite small and it does not currently have any of these the game-winning cards in it. It's just a lot of good cards. However, with this 22nd on the board, and seemingly it's going to be sticking around for at least a while longer, he's getting more and more likely that he's going to draw into an errata that finds Feigned Retreat or Feigned Retreat naturally, or a Key, or a Shiden, or a Signal Regiment. Any of these elites that are really just going to shut Urumoy out of the game.
Yeah, this 22nd Infantry Regiment does a lot of work here by giving Head just more options he desperately needs. Akita Regiment and Wirbelwind going into the front line, and he's drawing with 22nd Infantry Regiment the Feigned Retreat. Very important card in this matchup.
And I really like that trade with the Wirbelwind from Head's perspective. He recognizes that this isn't a matchup where it's all about just going face. You need to trade out with the units, stop these big we can do it, stop a potential tempo play that lets him get the half track to trade off with this 22nd. The Skytrain comes down, but that's just going to be likely answered by a Shinhodo and Type 93. And it gets another draw off the 22nd.
It's 3 cards by now, I think. And Urumoy is not being able to draw with his Sherman, so Recon Druid is the option here. Getting a little bit of HP, buffing his unit. This infantry will survive the trade, but so does the Shinhodo.
Yeah, it's funny because in a lot of matchups, you don't think of Shinhodo as necessarily a big unit. It's only a 3/3 unit. But right now, with all of these 2 attack units, 3 health is a big deal. It's a huge hurdle to get over. And just going face for 8 with the Shinhodo is dropping Urumoy down to 7 health, Feigned in hand for Head, Errato in hand to draw Bombing Raid, another Type 93 to buff the attack of his units. This is looking essentially game over.
Well, We Can Do It is able to heal a little bit, getting Patrol, another removal card. He's able to trade into the front line. He will survive for now, but it's looking tough for Moy here. Head is leading the aggression.
And Head really has his choice of what he wants to do here. He could drop the Feigned this turn. That's perfectly fine. He's even going to draw an extra card from 22nd to have a wider range. He can drop 2 1-drops with the Feigned. He can drop another Type 93, go face for 5 and drop the Feigned. He chooses just to play Dina. He doesn't even think he needs to play Feigned yet. And he picks up the Signal Regiment. And that very well might just be the nail in the coffin. Patrol is able to deal with it if Urumoy can get control of the front line, but he has not had control of the front line for a single turn this entire game.
And so what, J. King, you were talking about getting Feigned out potentially here. Head still has a fairly decent hand, though it's maybe not exactly what he's looking for with some of those smaller units. At what point do you decide, hey, it's worth chucking this with Feigned to go and try and, pull out maybe one of my game winners?
I think it comes down to the evaluation of how likely is it that my opponent could come back, and if my opponent could come back in this game, what would that look like? And if the answer is something that your hand is not prepared to deal with, then you want to play Feigned as quickly as possible, because it's not necessarily about needing Feigned on the following turn, but it's, do you want Feigned to have been played 2 or 3 turns in the future, which is going to allow you to have a full credits worth of turns playing unit after unit after unit. Either way, it was not going to matter though, and despite not playing Feigned, Head able to take this game out pretty convincingly with Uwumoy just not able to take the front line, which his deck is named after.
Well, like you said, Head waiting for, or thinking, hey, does my opponent have a chance of coming back? And probably decided, yeah, I think I'm okay here. And just pushing forward to take the win. And now we're going to see Head bring that Brit Air list, which didn't get banned because they brought the Soviet France deck. So probably puts them in a pretty good spot for this second matchup as well.
And going first is definitely what you want for Air. Picking up the Gladiator, not quite as powerful as, say, the Swordfish.
But there's the Albacore. Albacore turn 2 with this deployment effect, not just pinning, but dealing 1 damage, and that's all that it takes to destroy this little infantry and denying the Panzer 35T from blitzing out into the front line. And
30-second draw there for Uwumoy, incredibly unlucky. That's roughly a 1 in 16 to essentially be down a card. And that is not where you want to be against Brit Air, where you're struggling to deal with their board.
There is a Swordfish. Now there are 2 bombers for Head. With the 32nd Infantry Regiment plus Panzer 35T, he's able to get rid of the Albacore. But close air support is able to buff the Swordfish and the Gladiator, being able to kill the Panzer 35T. Air superiority could deal with the infantry regiment, or the second close air support to buff the Gladiator to 3/3 to survive the trade. I don't think it's a good option for Head just to trade his Gladiator and leaving it to die. But I'm not very convinced of the other options as well. What would you do, J. King?
I think you can afford to leave this infantry alive for a turn. If you really want to, you could play the air superiority. I do agree, though, that you absolutely do not want to trade this Gladiator unless it's being buffed again so it can survive through the attack. Because if you leave yourself with just the Swordfish on the board, from Head's perspective, he doesn't know that if Uwumoy has a half-track, and if a half-track comes down, suddenly Head's entirely out of units on board.
Yeah, that's true. And air superiority is so much better on bigger units like this 5th Rangers. I'm sure Head is glad he kept that.
And Type 94 is just another body that can be buffed by the second close air support in hand. And Uwumoy's hand is very close to being able to answer Head, but it just a little bit too far away. And Head choosing to actually go with Convoy after the air superiority, a little bit of a mistake, and that allows Uwumoy to push up the Hellcat and remove this Swordfish. That actually could be a potentially even game-losing mistake from Head, choosing not to play this close air support to buff the Swordfish out of this range.
But on the other side, buffing the Swordfish into an half-track retreat could have been game-losing as well. There are multiple options Head to play around. And it's... Well, in this case, yeah, it was not the right decision, because Moy had the strategic bombing, the Hellcat, and not the half-track. But it's always very hard to find the ideal play when not seeing all of the cards.
And 2 convoys, on top of the convoy he's played already, Head's hand is just refilled back to full, and things were looking a little scary for him, but now he has Shelling, Empire Strikes, HMS Illustrious, Albacore with a surprise attack, and he's really able to just respond to almost anything Uwumoy can push out. And Uwumoy still hasn't found Sherman. He hasn't found a second 5th Rangers. he's in an awkward situation where he can remove the Kitty Hawk and it will just be completely empty voids, but he's not able to push out a lot of pressure.
With the Greyhound and the 99th, he is able to get some pressure.
I mean, I think he should save these cards to be responsive. Play out the Greyhound to take the front line when you have a Sherman in hand, or play out the 35T plus 99th to remove a bomber that Head might otherwise expect to stick on the board. Very interesting to choosing to hold back the Greyhound altogether. Unless Urumoi runs the air defense, I'm not entirely sure I understand why there would be any reason not to push up the Greyhound.
He's not running air defense. His opponent can check. It looks like a bait for air defense.
And there's the Sherman draw, but he does not have Greyhound in hand, which would have been able to allow him to draw with the Sherman. And now he's pushing out the 35T, going face, but this is just going to walk straight into HMS Illustrious, Empire Strikes, attack with the bomber. The board will be fully cleared, and Urumoi will be down to just 3 cards in hand.
And of those 3 cards, one of them is a Sherman that's borderline useless, unless, I mean, could still draw a Greyhound in theory.
Yep, there's a few cards in Urumoi's deck that could allow him to draw with the Sherman, but it won't matter a whole lot since whatever he plays is going to just be picked off by these bombers. And a second Sherman draw is
this hurts.
Not what you want to see.
Absolutely right. Playing the Greyhound was the big mistake Moi did here.
Not even just playing the Greyhound, but had he also pushed it up to the front line, he still would have been able to draw with the Sherman following the full pin from the shelling. And I think that was just a little bit of a mistake from being used to playing on ladder. On ladder, you can hold up these 2 credits. You cannot push up the or the Greyhound to
another Sherman.
And
wait, he's able to get into the front line and get a card draw here. Wirbelwind and Red Devils.
And this could be the start of a comeback. Sexton's pinning 1, Albacore can pin another. Does Urumoi run the Stars and Stripes? Because if he does, Head cannot do this comfortably. And yes, he does run 1 copy of Stars and Stripes, so Head can't really be certain unless he pushes up the Swordfish as well, which if he does will just be responded to by Wirbelwind and Red Devils.
He can play the Rough Lightning and send both bombers into the front line.
That also is looking like a pretty solid play because you're essentially virtually guaranteeing that you get the control of the front line. Choosing instead to take the risk. If you have Stars and Stripes, you have Stars and Stripes, and as we see in Urumoi's hand, he does not have the Stars and Stripes. He's able to take off 2 of these bombers pretty comfortably. He could even take out the Sexton if he so chooses. But other than that, his hand isn't really able to do much. He needs to draw say like a 5th Rangers to drop as an 8/8. He needs to draw a Hellcat, another Hellcat to trade out the Sexton. And at this point, Head's deck just has more cards Head can draw into. Head still has Lend-Leases in the deck. He still has close air supports, more Empire Strikes.
Just doesn't look enough. Well, he's able to kill the Albacore and the Sexton.
And I actually like attacking the IG here because it's limiting your opponent's attack with bombers on the board. Because if you take out this IG, you're removing 1 attack from board. If you attack the Albacore, you're removing 1 attack from board. If you hit the IG, the second IG comes in pinned because of this Wirbelwind. So you're actually removing 2 attack from board. And if he is able to draw into a Stars and
the
Stripes,
Empire Strikes.
But second Empire Strikes is going to be the nail. in Uwumoy's coffin. That is just very, very unfortunate.
Look at that. Head instantly takes the front line, playing more units.
Yeah.
And Uwumoy is completely out of cards. He finds a Blitzkrieg. That's not doing anything. He still plays it, so...
Yeah, it seems the Blitzkrieg always turns up the turn after you lose the front line. That's, again, we've seen frontline seems to be struggling quite a bit throughout this tournament.
Well, in that scenario, having, to go up against the Brit Air list that can just kind of pick your stuff off without taking too much damage in return kind of feels bad, right? It just didn't quite line up. And I think, Jaking, you had pointed out at one point that Moy just wasn't finding any of the big boys that would be able to kind of hold down the fort, so to speak. No, what was it, Fifth Rangers or anything like that. So definitely probably didn't quite go their way, but that's kind of the beauty of not having your Brit Air band is, you get to use it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that there's a lot of room to play around. It's very easy to look at that game and just say, oh, well, Brit Air is broken. Like, obviously, it's going to win. It has so many bombers. But if Uwumoy had done that one turn slightly differently, the turn with the shelling, had he not played the Greyhound, or had he pushed up the Greyhound, or had he saved back the 35T and the 99th to take out the bombers on the following turn, or take out the Sexton even, that game could be completely different. That could have been easily one play that is the difference between winning and losing that game. So Brit Air is able to be defeated. You just have to be constantly playing on point the entire time, constantly be focused. And unfortunately, I think Uwumoy maybe lost a little bit of focus towards the second half of that second game.
Any thoughts to add there, Darkness, or you think Jay can kind of wrap that up pretty nicely?
He wrapped it up perfectly. Brit Air is definitely very strong, and that's the reason why we almost every time see this deck list got banned. Brit Air sometimes is just superior.
I think that there was also, like you said, Jaking, the aspect of, how you play against it. And it definitely looked beatable even in that matchup where there could have been a turning point. But if you make a mistake, they're going to take advantage of it. And that's exactly what we saw in that last quarterfinal. So let's bring up the bracket and set you all up for tomorrow when we go ahead and show you the semifinals. So there you have Berto defeating Noin 2-1. So Berto going on to face Tiger, who advanced as Zealang had to pull out of the event. Freddie defeating our fellow caster here, Jaking 2-0, moving on to take on Head, who had a pretty good showing versus Moy. So there you have day one of the Officer Club Clash. Our quarterfinals are set. Let's keep in mind, all of these players who did not make it past the quarterfinals will still be taking home 8 points in the new OCC point system. So Jakin, you're not walking away empty-handed. You got a couple points and you get to hang out with us to do the quarterfinals, and hopefully we will have you back for the semifinals, which will go live tomorrow. Stay tuned for more of the Officer Club Clash action right here